Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary, thank you for being here today, and certainly been a long day for you, at least listening to all the questions that you're receiving today. I know that Dr. Barrasso spent some time talking about fentanyl and the crisis that we have as a nation. Last month at a hearing here, I had an opportunity to talk about a friend of mine, a former business school dean at the College of Charleston, whose son, Alan Shao, his namesake, lost his life to fentanyl on the first use. And it is hard to think about this crisis simply by thinking about the numbers. Over 70,000 other American families have had a similar experience. These are fathers, brothers, sisters, daughters, all lost because of fentanyl. And I know that you spoke sometime with Dr. Barrasso about the importance of Mexico and precursors from China and the approach that we should take with the Mexican cartels. I'd like for you to illuminate some of the work that we're doing, because as I look through the budget, I see a lot in the form of technical assistance, but I don't see a lasting commitment to confronting this challenge. And Secretary, I know that just a few weeks ago, a few South Carolinians were kidnapped and some died at the hands of the Mexican cartels. So we take this issue seriously as a nation, but at home, this is a sensitive and serious issue. I'd like to know what we're doing from an all-of-government approach, not simply your department, but seeing it from a panoramic view, number one. Number two, what else can be done with Mexico? And number three, I know that there are times when fentanyl could literally be shipped from China straight to America. What can we do to cut that off?
Thank you very much, Senator. And I could not agree with you more. I deeply share this concern, and I think you're exactly right that it's so important to put a name and a face to it, because these numbers become abstractions. Hopefully we'd be galvanized by the fact that it is the #1 killer of Americans aged 18 to 49. Amazing. But it does come down to these individual stories. And I also fully agree with you that we have to have, and I believe we do have, a comprehensive approach that here at home, I mentioned, we're of course working, as we always need to, on the demand side, on the treatment side, on the antidote side. That's vitally important, but of course that doesn't answer the problem. It's a necessary component of it. Second, we talked a little bit about this with Senator Barrasso. On the border itself, we do have good technology that can better detect the efforts to smuggle pills that are produced in Mexico and brought over the border, because 95% of this is coming through legal ports of entry. It's not being smuggled across points of the border that are in between points of entry, but at the points of entry. There is the technology that can better detect that. Third, though,
Secretary, on that point, please, is there high utilization of the technology that we have?
So I think it's, as I understand it, and this is not, I don't want to try to speak authoritatively because it's beyond my area of needed expertise, but as I understand it, we've been working as a government over several years now, over a couple of administrations, to deploy this technology. It's been a little slower than I think everyone would have liked. It's now speeding up. And in fact, there was a very interesting piece, I think, a week or two ago in the Washington Post, laying out some of the work that's being done. But we need to press the accelerator on that, because the technology is effective. When I was last in Mexico with President Biden, one of the things that we talked about with President Lopez Obrador was the deployment of this technology as well on the Mexican side of the border. So that's two. Three, to your point, we have to press even harder on the accelerator in the work that we're doing jointly and supporting Mexico in breaking up these cartels, breaking up the finance networks, taking down the labs. Of course, it's not just the precursors of the pills themselves, it's the pill presses that are fabricated and that come across, all that. Now, in fairness, they are making a very significant effort, and they have put far more resources into this. They have actually done an effective job in disbanding, disrupting labs, but and arresting dozens of high-ranking officials in these cartels. But these labs, as you know, can fit in a room.
Pop back up.
Yeah, just pop back up. So that's challenge. But there's one last thing I know.
Two questions with 2 minutes left. So
very quickly. Wrap up. The other big piece I mentioned is internationally, one of the big problems is the diversion of perfectly legal precursors into illicit use in making fentanyl. We have seized the G20, the largest economies in the world. We just had a foreign ministers meeting. I got put on the agenda as an action item for the G20 building out a coalition to try to deal more effectively with this. And what does that mean? It means simply, among other things, that working with the private sectors in all of these countries, we do a better job sharing information about diversion, getting better labeling on legal precursors that then get diverted, and making sure that there's a program in place so that you know your customer. If you're shipping a chemical, you actually know where it's going. You put all of these pieces together, I think you can have a greater impact.
Thank you. According to the recent report from the IAEA, Iran is getting dangerously close to having weapons-grade plutonium. Last month, the agency reported the discovery of uranium particles enriched up to 84%, 6% below the threshold necessary to create a nuclear weapon. Given the regime's brutal crackdown against peaceful protesters and their own efforts to sabotage the negotiations, to most people in the room, it seems clear that negotiating a new JCPOA should be completely off the table from my perspective. I hope that's yours as well. What practical steps are you taking to work with our allies and partners to actually address this threat, especially given the fact that certain sanction requirements are about to lapse?
Thank you. Well, as a practical matter, the JCPOA is not on the table at this moment, in large part because as we were working in good faith to see if we could get a mutual return to compliance by Iran and by the United States, the Iranians rejected a proposal that was on the table put forward by the European Union, by our European partners, actually endorsed even by Russia and China. They rejected that last summer, and they have not demonstrated seriousness in that. We are determined one way or another that Iran not acquire a nuclear weapon. I have to tell you, we continue to believe that in terms of getting an effective result, diplomacy is still the most effective way to do that, but it takes two to tango, as we would say, and the Iranians have not demonstrated seriousness of purpose. Meanwhile, we are working in close concert with allies and partners. I was talking about this a little bit earlier. I think we now have a much more shared perspective on this challenge. I think minds have also been galvanized by what's happened in the streets of Iran over the last 6 or 9 months, by the provision by Iran to Russia of drone technology for the war of aggression against Ukraine. And all of that has brought countries closer together in trying to deal with some of these egregious actions.
I know I'm out of time, but short question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'll try and be short.
U.S. embassies in Africa.
Yeah.
There's a shortage of staff. What are you doing about it? And frankly, you think about the CCP and its issues in its growth through its Belt and Road projects. Seems like we need to have more focus on Africa than we have. I know that you've had some work with the African Leaders Summit. Love to hear your thoughts on A, the shortage, and B, strategy.
Yeah, no, thank you. This is something we're very actively working on. This shortage is a problem. Actually, in the budget, we have increased dollars for additional hires. That will help in part. It won't solve the problem, but it will help address the problem. We're also reviewing why some of our posts don't receive sufficient bids, because, as you know, the way this works in part is our Foreign Service officers say, hey, here's where I want to go. And we've seen in a number of countries, the bids just aren't there. We're trying to understand why that is, and then to see what we can do to incentivize people to serve in posts that, for one reason or another, have not been attracting the personnel they deserve.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Cardin.